Guys, I am very excited to announce my first ever debut EP on physical disc. Get ready for a look at my magnum opus. Pre-orders start now. Never judge a book by its cover. For example, I may look like a guy from America who makes videos about music, but I actually make all my money running an Icelandic whaling operation. And no truer is that statement than with album covers. I know for a lot of people, album art is a key factor in enjoyment. I mean, it is just there staring you right in the face as you listen to your music. And it is important on a grander scale, as it is that first impression that can give you context to the style, the tone, the genre, and blah blah blah. Good album, bad cover. You ever see a kid so ugly you wonder how much it affects the parents' level of unconditional love they have? Because, you know, it's gotta be a little bit, right? Is that also true for music? Because if my baby came out looking like that, I would send that thing back to where it once came. S.C.I.E.N.C.E by Incubus, simultaneously my favorite new, rap, and funk metal album, but I don't think the bar was that high. I re-listen to this one frequently, which means I frequently get to see this smug asshole. Now don't get it twisted, this is iconic, but it's not a good cover, people. It's got that 90s stank all over it, that high contrast futuristic look. Which aged very well, by the way. I go outside and everything looks like this. First of all, this looks like we're in the Linkin Park In the End music video with a blue hue. If this is a seemingly endless desert, then why are the Alps in the background, and why is the moon so fucking huge compared to them? What kind of place is this? But come on. You see him, I see him. Who is that? That's actually Chuck Boyd, the father of the lead singer Brandon Boyd. And he's actually a pretty integral part of Incubus. He was in 3 music videos and he was on the cover of their second EP, Enjoy Incubus. And this man has quite the past, from being in cigarette commercials to Predator 2 to a Chuck Norris movie. He was also apparently the narrator in a bunch of 70s sex ed videos. This guy taught your parents how to fuck. You know, maybe if this guy's floating head was in the corner of the sex ed videos I watched, giving little addendums, maybe I'd be a normal person and not get my sexual attractions from the cartoons I watched. Speaking of cartoons, this reminds me of that Uncle Grandpa episode with the giant floating head that looks very similar. You may remind me of Kino, but you're still ugly. Iconic, but ugly. And another unfortunate case of being ugly is MF Doom's solo debut album, Operation Doomsday. Now, I'm not talking about this cover is awesome. I'm talking about the 2011 reissue, where they didn't change the artwork, they fucking neutered it because this shit has no balls. Now, the art is not bad, it was actually drawn by the same guy who did the cover of Food. But realistically, put these side by side and what are you gonna choose? The original is simple, but the colors are vibrant. The line work is rough and it really makes it feel like it's coming out of a comic book, and if you listen to Doom, that's pretty much his whole shtick. You're goddamn right I don't skip the 60s superhero skits that last for 2 minutes.
The failure of Doom's experiment did not end his tragedy.
I mean, his whole persona is villain, his work plays into the idea that he's someone to be feared, and having straight up Dr. Doom on the cover, it's menacing. Now, compare this to the reissue, I trust this dude's goofy ass smile to watch my kid.
MF Doom. MF Doom.
A lot of the menacing aura is lost here. The colors are more drowned out and the lines are more uniform and curved. It overall has more detail, which actually detracts from the old school comic style. Now, I am no artist, and like I said, the art is still good, but I can't help but notice these little things that sell the villainous concept short. For example, the hoodie strings being tied together and thin rather than being thick and loose. And the hand being slim and dainty rather than a thick Hulk hand. And the biggest thing that bothers me is the anatomy of Doom's face. If you don't see what I'm getting at, let me illustrate it for you, but I will warn you, you will never see this cover the same way again. Questionable art is going to be a recurring theme in this video, and let me tell you, 90s rap albums make me question a lot of things. Especially southern rap, they have that style, you know what I'm talking about. That graphic design is my passion style. Personally, I blame the CIA for selling bootleg copies of Photoshop to low-income neighborhoods. Now this style defines an era of rap, and there's a lot of candidates. But this is good albums with bad covers, so there will be no Martin Luther King Jr. Whopper with cheese today. Instead, I want to highlight the Outkast album Aquemini. Yeah, it's ass. I'm pretty sure I've seen this painted on the outside of the Gravitron at the county fair. I am genuinely fucking tweaking trying to take in everything on this cover. The gross, overly detailed art mixed with the weird rendered 3D and the ridiculous lens flares off of every surface. It feels really dated, and that's the worst thing about it, because this album has aged incredibly. It's one of the best hip-hop albums of the 90s, and yet it looks right at home with other classics such as First Come, First Serve by Dr. Doom, and one I have no business saying.
I'm white!
It's a huge step down from their previous album, Atlians, which nails the comic book cover style perfectly. Okay, now these are some ugly covers, but I don't think being ugly is a complete deal breaker. I think ugly can sometimes be kinda charming. It's how my first girlfriend felt about me, and that's how I feel about Primus covers. I love Primus, and I love these covers. They give off some Wallace and Gromit vibes, or some Nicktoons show you see at 1 AM and you spend the rest of your life wondering if it was a fever dream or not. They go in tandem with their music. It's very quirky yet uniquely stylized in a way that's still enjoyable. What isn't enjoyable is the cover of the Brown album. Oh, it's brown alright. All the wacky and whimsical has been siphoned out like a balding 25-year-old man who's cutting his losses. What even happened here? Nice Microsoft Word art, bro. It's not like the world's gonna run out of clay or something. Oh my god. Really, what is there to talk about? It's word art on a diarrhea gradient. The background screams, I am in a musty thrift store, and I feel like that's what drives a lot of people away from this album, because it feels like the bargain bin Primus album. And I would say this one's still worth a listen. It's a bit more experimental, but it's definitely got some good tracks on there. And let's be real, if you're listening to Primus, you're probably used to hearing weird shit all the time. Hell, you're probably a little weird yourself. But not in a cool, mysterious way, more like a Daniel Larson kind of way. Usually when something is called the blank album, it's inspired by or parodying the Beatles' White album, which will not be in this video, believe it or not. This is actually a good cover. But the Brown album, it just feels like there's too much. I would have assumed they would have went full White Album parody if only they didn't get beaten out by the child molesters. Speaking of the Beatles and the White Album, it comes from an era where a picture of the band members with awful haircuts was enough to sell 5 million plus copies. And as a result, a lot of early album covers are just dog shit. But you know what, I can forgive them. They were still figuring shit out, and back then you didn't have access to web-based Photoshop. But it seems like all the oldies spent their time in art class etching dicks into the desk with a number 2 pencil. So let's take a look at some of these early eyesores. Steely Dan, everyone gets down to some Steely Dan. But the cover of Countdown to Ecstasy, well, this is just what you see when you walk into the bathroom at a hardcore venue. Man, if I had $1 for every album that had 3 flesh monstrosities front and center, I would have $2, which isn't that much, but it's weird that it happened twice. Black Sabbath is about as good as it gets for proto-heavy metal, but it seems like they spent their budget for graphic designers on cocaine and ants because these covers are lame as hell. I would go as far as to say that none of their early album covers are good, except for their debut with that bitch looking all creepy as hell. Paranoid is stupid, Master of Reality is lazy, and Bloody Sabbath is just wallpaper they ripped out of a basement hookah lounge. And while Technical Ecstasy is not really considered good, I think it's still worth mentioning the polarizing cover, as even Ozzy himself describes it as 2 robots screwing on an escalator. It's ecstasy! God, don't you even know ecstasy when you see it? And then there's Deep Purple, who really love looking at themselves. Especially as candles, or as a comet, or as bubbles, or as wine, or as a Doom wall texture, or as Mount Rushmore. Doesn't really work with 5 people, does it? The Beach Boys, or as I like to call them, the Beatles without the British accents. You probably know what's coming. Pet Sounds is the quintessential what were they thinking cover. But the weird choice of leisurely activity has become recognizable in its own way, and all it took was a little animal abuse. But let's take a look at a different album, The Beach Boys Today, where the unfortunate framing makes it look like they're running a 5-way train on each other. You know, what is it with old covers and being incredibly horny? Going through grandma's record collection is a lot like going through dad's movie collection for how much unexpected boob you'll be faced with. It's not like this has gone away or anything. I can still go to my local record store and see an erect cock. Truly, the consequences of whipped cream and other delights have been a disaster for the human race. The original release of Electric Ladyland, published by Track Record, just gave up and said, you know what, here you go kid, here's a bunch of naked ladies. This was like a week of goon material back in the 60s. And that's because, to the surprise of no one, sex sells. The average consumer's monkey brain fires off on all cylinders when they see a side boob. And don't take this as me announcing my homosexuality or anything. I'm not saying this is necessarily a bad thing, but sometimes it can go a little too far. Like, oh man, I want to listen to some old albums today. I think I'll pull up that Cream side project, Blind Faith. Oh, but Led Zeppelin, man, I love Led Zeppelin. I think I'll listen to their album, Houses of the Holy. Oh, but Scorpions, they had that album called Virgin Killer. And to all my viewers watching this from the FBI headquarters, I actually meant to save these pictures of a cupcake. These covers were bad enough for me to want to make a 14-minute video about them, but despite this, no cover keeps me up at night seething with rage. Except for one. One cover that I believe is the worst of all time. Absolute abysmal dog shit, complete corny garbage. And that album is... What don't I like about the cover of 10 by Pearl Jam? I don't like that it looks like a Dare poster. I don't like that it looks like a middle school football team just won the championship. I just listened to the track based on the real suicide of a high schooler. What is there to be cheerful about? I for real thought these group of hands belonged to a random group of teenagers before I saw the full cover. And yes, I know the CD insert unfolded to be a full poster, and it was probably epic as fuck. But I wouldn't even use this to cover a fist-sized hole in my wall. All I can say is that the cover is lame and uninteresting, and it shows. Look at the big four of grunge. Nirvana has the most seen penis in human history and a flayed human. Soundgarden has tattoo bait.
Look how clean it is.
Alice in Chains has the coolest looking suicide and boobs. And Pearl Jam has a damn group high five. Don't even get me started on the avocado, man. What the fuck is with the avocado? When I initially thought of this video, I thought it would be easy. I thought I could just go through some albums I like, pick out a few stinkers, and call it a day. But the more I dug into this topic, the more I realized that a lot of album covers are just crap. But some are crap in a way that you would almost expect. Like that Dry Kill Logic cover I flashed a couple seconds ago. It's disgusting. Like I almost had $3 in my pocket. It's hard to explain, but the album, this gross, aggressive nu metal record, it sounds like the cover in the best way possible. And if an album cover does a good job at representing the material, is it really bad at all? Is the Cemetery cover ugly even though it's deliberately trying to be schizo? Is Steal This Album's cover lazy even though it's trying to represent a bootleg CD? Is Certified Lover Boy bad because it represents how much Drake likes watching other women get impregnated? Man, these questions are really making it hard to objectively look at covers. Like maybe if we couldn't see covers, more people would be open to listening to different genres of music. And you know what they say, first impressions the worst impressions. Ah man, I gotta stop. There's only one way I can stop looking at album covers superficially. And I don't want to do it, but my integrity of being a music reviewer is at stake. I can no longer wipe my own ass.